Welcome back. One viewer of last week's talk said the stuff on penetration laid her out flat. Sorry about that. The thing is about all this material I'm presenting is it's already out there waiting to be noticed. I'm just the guy who notices. A reminder that all my talks are available on Bexley Seabury's YouTube channel. You can find a link on the Facebook page for this event. Today I'd like to begin making the transition from the beautiful young man as sacrifice to the beautiful young man as hero. We've been considering the way women achieve sanctity by remaining intact, men by being pierced. Now we'll think about the Savior as one who puts himself forward heroically to be pierced for the good of his community. In his foundational book, Christus Victor, the Swedish theologian Gustaf Åhlén calls this view of atonement the classic one, while he calls the sacrificial version we've been looking at so far the Latin version. Åhlén argues that the classic atonement theory, in which Jesus takes on the powers in an heroic battle, is the true New Testament theology. He thinks the Latin atonement theology that became standard in later years is not really derived from the New Testament, even though it can be proof texted from it. Jesus seems to embrace an epic struggle when he says, if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but his end has come. But no one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his property without first tying up the strong man. Then indeed the house can be plundered. That's Mark 3. The earliest Christians rarely depicted Jesus on the cross, usually substituting his monogram or a crown of laurels. This Roman ivory from around 420 is believed to be the first narrative depiction of the crucifixion. On the left, Judas has hanged himself from a tree, while on the right, a pretty buff and heroic-looking Jesus seems to be saying, "Bring it on. No sacrificial lamb here." If an heroic savior battling the powers of darkness was familiar to the earliest Christians, there may have been some crossover influence from a religion that had its origins at just about the same time, Mithraism. Now, scholars have noted the many similarities between Mithraism and Christianity for centuries. Since the advent of the internet, as with so many other topics, the debate has become rather heated. I'm no expert in this area, and I don't have a horse in this race. But there are some aspects of Mithraism everyone can agree on. The divine Mithras slew the cosmic bull with the help of a dog, a snake, and a scorpion. You don't want to know what the scorpion's role is. From the death of the bull come wheat, wine, and all helpful herbs and plants. An image of this slaughter, called a tauroctony, was central to every Mithraic temple. Mithras' birthday was celebrated on December 25th. He had 12 disciples. Worship consisted of a ritual meal, and initiates were baptized in the blood of sacrificial bulls, so they were washed in the blood of the bull. Oh, and soldiers were the key demographic for both Christianity and Mithraism. Of course, there's one big distinction. Not even the followers of Mithras claimed that he was ever an historical person, and those 12 disciples were most likely the signs of the zodiac. What's significant for our discussion, however, is the way the tauroctony, or depiction of the slaughter of the bull, occupied the same place in Mithraic sanctuaries that the cross or crucifix does in Christian sanctuaries. In other words, it was the central image of devotion. And in these images, Mithras is invariably depicted as strong, young, and beautiful to accomplish his heroic deed. What if our depictions of Jesus' death portrayed him as engaged in an epic battle? It's occurred to at least a few artists. Certainly we would feel a lot less sorry for him. Here's the image I looked at each Sunday when I joined the Episcopal Church at the age of 16. This is in the Church of Christ the King in Tucson, and Jesus is stepping off the cross. Certainly in the heroic mode. It reminds me of the Easter hymn that goes, "Death and life have contended in that combat stupendous. The Prince of Life who died reigns immortal." Mithraism is generally considered to have died out in the Roman Empire in the late 4th century, suppressed by the ascendant Christian religion. Naturally, when I googled Mithraism today, I was taken immediately to mithraism.info, a handsome website that explains Mithraism and argues that it's the ideal religion for the 21st century. Who knew? Didn't check to see if they're still sacrificing bulls. But I'm interested in a different fate for ancient Roman Mithraism. The religion was especially strong in the south of France and Spain. The Christians knocked down Mithraea, its rivals' temples, everywhere they could find them, and it seemed like that was that. Except it wasn't. Centuries later, sometimes in the exact sites of the ruined temples of Mithras, sometimes just in their general vicinity, a different kind of combat stupendous with bulls arose, the bullfighting arena. I'll have a lot to say about this in the book, but for now I'll just whet your appetite with a few facts and images. Bullfighters are, almost without exception, young, beautiful men. They wear beautiful, elaborate costumes that emphasize their erotic appeal, the donning of which is a ritual in itself. While it's no longer the case consistently because of the decline in religious order membership, at one time the suit of lights, as it's called, was made of fabric embroidered in convents by nuns, the same fabric used to make the church's vestments. So the vestments worn by the heroic man who offers himself to be pierced are embroidered by women who have remained intact, and that same cloth is used to make the vestments of the priest who goes to the altar to sacrifice Jesus once again. Oh my. I'll take a hiatus next week because of Thanksgiving, but I'll be back on the 29th with more crazy connections. Hope to see you then.